First and foremost, thank you guys all for coming out. I know that that the idea of consumer interaction has a lot of different meanings to a lot of different folks. So we're gonna share a little bit of perspective today about kind of what we're seeing in the market, and hopefully this will be relevant to large brands and small brands alike, whether you're a young startup just kind of getting going with product development, or you're a mature brand that's looking to connect to consumers. Hopefully this methodology will resonate. So one of the first things I want to share really is just kind of how we got here. IDL has been around for a long time, and we've been known in the past as kind of a retail-driven company. That hasn't changed. However, the retail market is changing really, really rapidly, and the way that we look at consumer interaction is moving beyond the walls of retail very, very quickly. And I think that we're fortunate to be living in a region and in a time where there's a ton of innovation happening in the Northwest, and a ton of new product development and new thinking coming out of this region. And so I think it's relevant to take a look at some of the stuff that we've got around today on the Oregon Trail, and we'll trade on that a little bit later as well. But the idea is basically that we're about creating experiences for consumers. So we'll guide you through some of that. The idea of the Oregon Trail and the idea of kind of this trailblazing innovation is something that resonates, I think, with a lot of us in the room in different ways. Whether we came here over the past 10 years like I did, or whether we're multi-generation in the Northwest, I think that spirit of innovation, that spirit of trailblazing, that spirit of excitement in something new is something that resonates. And though our vehicles have changed, and today it's food carts and bicycles and overloaded Subarus as opposed to covered wagons, I think the spirit remains the same. And I think that's one of the things that connects us to this event and to the products that we're going to be talking about. One of the things that we're seeing evolve really, really rapidly is how consumers are now driving the brand connection. Used to be that a brand told us how to connect to it, right? And I like the Michael Jordan example. When I was a kid, I fell in love with Michael Jordan, not because I necessarily was a great basketball player, but because kind of Nike told me to, right? And that's evolved into a tremendous brand and its own story. That's a story that was driven by the brand first, right? And it drove it through the consumer and into retail, and it's worked tremendously well. In today's world, that script is changing, right? Today, consumers are holding influencers up, and brands are finding influencers that then connect back to the brand. So if you think about the way brand marketing works traditionally, you would have brand marketing leadership delivering a brief across a multiple agency platform. You'd have your digital agency, your retail agency, your brand agency, all receiving a similar brief with the hope that we're all driving towards a similar common goal at the end of the day. The unfortunate reality in today's world is that sometimes that diverts as opposed to coming together. And the reason for that is that inversion in the way that consumers think about who we are. So to go back to the Oregon Trail, we don't want brands dying of dysentery, right? But the fact that consumers are now driving this is also really exciting, because one of the things that they're asking for more than anything else is our authentic voice. What is it that makes this brand who it is and what it is, without the glossy shell that we used to have to put over the top of it, right? And I think that's something that young brands, emergent brands do really well today, is finding how we connect to influencers and how you create something that's shareable and memorable, whether it's a small physical expression or a complete flagship retail experience, something that can 10x your story by making it shareable through the channel that you truly believe in. One of the things that we're seeing is that the old model is dissolving, right? So what used to be big box is now specialty retail. What used to be broad appeal is now targeted influencers. These are all real trends that are happening, and the wave is on top of us right now, right? This isn't something that's happening in 5 years. This is something that's happening today, and this is something that traditional retail has been slow to adopt, reticent to adopt, perhaps, and something that traditional advertising has been slow to adopt and reticent to adopt. And so what's happening is that there are other vehicles that are taking its place. So where the opportunity, whether you're a large brand or small, used to be to show up in one retailer the exact same way every single time, that's being replaced by the opportunity to show up in key markets in really authentic, relevant voices. The problem with that for a lot of brands is that can be really confusing, right? So how do you know which channel is right for you? How do you know whether you need to be showing up on Instagram or at an event or a collaboration? That can be pretty difficult. But we believe that there's one way to simplify that equation. So what we believe is that if you create and focus on physical moments, physical experiences that are memorable and that make people want to share what you're doing, and you pair that with shareable digital and social content, you can create a level of gravity around the brand that becomes memorable and that becomes sticky to the consumer. We believe that this is what's replacing a lot of that old school thinking, right? So it's not just the physical experience, it's pairing that physical experience with content that becomes sticky and shareable and extendable. So as opposed to showing up the same way 3,000 times, you're now showing up in 8 key markets, but the way that you show up in New York is becoming relevant to that kid in Oklahoma City that's also interested in your brand and in your product. And here's some of the stuff that we're doing that's resonating. So I think one of the things that's really working, I'll look at Sarah here, our creative director that was sort of in charge of this project, was the work that we've done with Key Australia. Key Australia is a brand that's born out of really concert event sunglasses. And they built their brand entirely on social media. So I don't know, how many of you guys are familiar with Key? A few? Right? So they don't have a single pair of sunglasses that's over $75. Right? Everything is usually $65 or less, am I right? And yet, over the last few years, they've been able to amass over 1 million followers on Instagram. And they've done it through key fashion influencers, through a really, really strong photography presence on social media. And we've been lucky enough to help them develop their first physical experiences. Now, the difference between that and what we've done for traditional retail is that this entire store was designed with shareability in mind. Right? So the traditional merchandising, the traditional backstock, all of that went kind of out the window, and the idea was to create moments where you experience a very, very pure look at the product that's also able to be shared on Instagram. So it's the same format, right? We're not here to tell you that people are not going to be spending money at retail any longer. What we're saying is that emergent brands, new thinking is going to help revolutionize the way retail works, the way physical experiences work, and the way that we all knew retail before is going to be very, very different in the next 5 to 10 years. Even large brands like Coca-Cola are thinking through this experience. So this is an interesting challenge and opportunity that we faced in creating an experience out of a brand whose product is really pretty non-memorable in its packaged goods state, right? So we all know the center of the grocery store is dying. Packaged goods are no longer what they used to be. All of the energy is around the edges of the store. So how do you take something that's served in a plastic bottle and make it interesting? How do you tell that story? And what we did is find ways to pull stories out of that product. So one of the things that Coca-Cola really believes in is the water story and the sustainability story around water. Water is the predominant ingredient in Coca-Cola. It's about 90 to 95% of the product. And that's why they have the polar bear in so much of their campaign work. So right at the front of the store, we created a sustainability piece and a sustainability story that's all around the reuse of products. So this fixture that you're seeing that's sort of focused around this glass chandelier is entirely created out of recycled Coca-Cola bottles. They were all fabricated here in Portland with a glass blower that took existing Coca-Cola bottles and created that chandelier. And it anchors a story around the reuse of their aluminum, the reuse of their plastic into new products. So it reframes the brand and what that product means to the consumer in ways that are interesting and shareable. And then we leverage the water story by way of the polar bear to create a water and ice experience that kids can then become immersed in and shared. So it was retail meets video game, so a little bit of edutainment at retail, if you will, that allows that polar bear story really to come to life and makes kids want to take pictures and share that story as a part of the physical experience. Another thing that we're doing quite a bit of right now is actually extending the physical experience beyond an environment and into influencers' hands. And I think that's one thing that we've done quite a bit with some of our larger brand clients as well, is help tell their story to influencers and then help those influencers share the story on social media beyond the retail. And in this case, we told the story of Ken Griffey Jr. being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So this was a project that the Nike team came together around a raw concept. This is one that started with, we just want to celebrate Ken Griffey Jr. getting into the Hall of Fame, and turned into a 3-part story that was delivered by way of packages that showed up in people's homes or in people's offices that then became an unboxing experience that were shared on social media. So the idea of how you get your brand out there in the physical space can be translated a million different ways. It can be an entire space. It can be nothing more than a small kit that gets shared on social media in a way that's interesting. To bring that back to our environment, to local brands here in Portland that are just getting started or that are 50, 60 years into their run, I think we share a really, really interesting opportunity as a region and as a community. I think we're fortunate that we have so much innovation happening in our space that allows us to think differently. And if I were to leave you guys with something, it would be to not think so much about what mass appeal is going to do to your product, but to think through how you can share your voice authentically through a channel that's going to resonate to your consumer and make it shareable, right? So whether that's through social media or through a collaboration with other brands, to think through how you can connect to a brand, how you can connect to your consumer in a way that makes them want to share your story. And I think that's one of the things that we're focusing on now, is how we take some of the things that we've become really good at as an agency in creating these physical moments and pair it with content that becomes sticky and shareable to the consumer. So that said, this is a happy hour event, so I'm going to keep it relatively short. We've got a lot of folks from the crew here in the audience, so I would encourage you guys to chat up, ask questions. If you guys have any questions of me, feel free to fire away. Other than that, let's enjoy a drink and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks.
Come with it. Shh, shh. Meditate, meditate. Got so much on my mind. Got so much on my back. Put so much on my grind.